Hey everybody, welcome this morning. It is Spiritual Healthcare Day number 48. Day number 48. That's crazy. Here we are. I'm glad to be here with everybody. It is so awesome to come together every morning and do this. Welcome to all of you. We've got some pretty cool stuff today to talk about. Good morning, Jason. Nice to see you. We've got some really, really good information today about hauntings, about what's promoted versus what's not promoted, all sorts of crazy things like that, and talking about different categories of hauntings. And we're gonna break some of that down. We're gonna break some of that down for you guys today because there's a lot of stuff that has, I guess, been going around about TV shows and stuff like that. Just a lot of like misinformation. So we're gonna clear some of that up today. Good morning, Ursula. Nice to see you. It's so interesting to see where different people in different categories kind of fall when it comes to paranormal research and what people think and what's protocol and what's not protocol and all that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about that today. Good morning, Jay. Good morning, Patricia. Good morning, Darren. Nice to see you guys. We're going to go through as well the SPR's categories of paranormal phenomenon, which is the Society of Psychical Research. So they are probably one of the oldest distinguished research organizations in the world. They're based out of the UK. So so we're going to be going through that, and we're going to be going through behavior types, because that's how I've worked paranormal research for a long time. So we'll go through that too. Good morning, Brandy. Nice to see you. Shadow, nice to see you. It's always so good to see everybody in the morning. It's I don't know what the weather is like on your end, you guys, but it's actually quite nice here. It was really nice. Galen went out for his first walk, or slither, whatever, last night. So that was pretty cool. It wore him right out though. He's just exhausted now. Hello, Eric. Good morning, Kaz. Nice to see you guys. Good morning, Edward. How are you? It is so good to see everybody. I hope you guys had a fantastic night last night. I have a really neat to-do for you guys today that's actually going to be happening at 6 p.m. Mountain Time tonight, if you guys are interested. So I'll talk about that a little bit later, because that's going to be really fun. I'm definitely going to be going to this one. I hope you guys, as I say, are doing amazing. We're going to cover, different types of hauntings and stuff like that today, and how everything that we've learned applies to all of these different categories, because there's a whole bunch of different categories that we're going to go through and take a look at, so that it becomes a little bit clearer. Because I know it's funny because so many people have different definitions of, what like things like poltergeist is versus what, like a spirit haunting or an intelligent haunting versus residual energy and all of those different things. So we've got a lot to go through. We have a lot to go through today, but we're going to do it. We're totally going to do it. So I wanted to kick this off with talking about the Society of Psychical Research, because they were founded in the 1800s, and they were originally started up because there was so many cases coming out of fraud and also like just crazy stuff. People were starting to realize that they could make money off of grieving people and faking seances and psychics and all this kind of thing. So the SPR was actually started up in order to debunk some of the crazy, while at the same time proving and putting some serious research and funding into actual paranormal phenomena. So the SPR has been around, as I say, for a long time, and it's featured some incredible researchers over the years. Their website, for those of you guys who want to check out their website later, it is spr.ac.uk. Okay, so it's a weird address. So it's spr.ac.uk, and you guys can find them. But so they have categorized, let's just crack into this here. They have categorized paranormal phenomenon in a number of different ways, which has kind of become criteria now for genuine researchers and things like that. So they've been looking at things like precognition cases. Okay, so precog is the idea of examining possible predictions of future events, dream content, corroborating all of those different factors. So that's one area that they look into. The next is extrasensory perception, so ESP. All right, so spontaneously aware of things outside of the ordinary senses. All right, so people who have picked up thoughts or emotions, or like having sort of an impulse or a voice or seeing a vision, all sorts of things like that. Remote viewing, that kind of thing, all falls into the category of ESP. Good morning to the new people. Good morning, Des. Good morning, Simon and Marge. How are you guys this morning? We're delving into hauntings today. The critical stuff, the juicy stuff. So the third category the SPR had identified as out-of-body experience cases, which are pretty self-explanatory. People who have either, fallen asleep and felt like they've left their body, or people who have, been, say, for example, under anesthesia or something like that, and all of a sudden they feel like they've left their body and gone elsewhere. Usually they come back with, bizarre information that they shouldn't have had that turns out to be accurate, things like that. So the next two, which are apparition sightings, as well as poltergeist cases and other paranormal physical events. Okay, so there's the two last ones. These are the ones we're going to be chatting about today. And I want to get into specifically the difference between things like residual energy versus things like hauntings that seem to have an intelligence behind them. Seem to have a mind and a interaction abilities and things like that, because there's people have had some confusion over that. The word poltergeist has had a bunch of different connotations over the years. So the word poltergeist, some people think about it as a human-based activity or a human-based phenomenon where we're actually moving things with our own energy and our own minds without us knowing. So PK, psychokinesis, things like that. The German word for poltergeist means noisy spirit. It actually translates to noisy spirit. And a few cases, have seemed, as I say, intelligent and things like that. So there's sort of a difference in definition between those two. So we're going to be talking about some of the more intelligent stuff, as well as the things that just seem to be, our own minds, our own brains, and our own focus. Because as we know, we can manipulate all sorts of things with our thoughts and our brains and minds and all sorts of things like that. So, residual energy. Here's one of the first categories, and apparitions and stuff like that can end up falling into this category often. People have picked up on the idea sometimes that these images or these apparitions will repeat themselves over and over, which has led to the idea that these spirits are somehow stuck or something like that, and that's just not the case. So when we look at residual energy, the idea behind it is that our world, our universe, our environment is somehow able to record instances of history. And that history might have been yesterday, or it could have been 200 years ago. Okay, there doesn't seem to be a limit. So I've had cases where I've had residual energy be regarding something that happened 2 months ago, such as keys dropping on the floor or something like that, and you hear it over and over and over again. Or I've been in cases where it was 100-year-old history, and you see an apparition moving through the house and you can't get its attention. So some of the hallmarkers of residual energy, so you know what to look for, are things like repetitive activities. So, for example, hearing, say, let's use the example of the set of keys. You hear the keys drop over and over and over and over again, maybe at the same time every day or once a month or something like that. And there's no keys in the room. So there's no correlation between physical activity and the sounds and stuff like that you're hearing. There's no poltergeist attachment with residual energy at all. There's no correlation there. Oftentimes people will see apparitions that will move through a room, and as I say, they will go to get their attention, be like, hey, it's up. And there's nothing. There's no response. It just moves through the room, walks through a wall where a door used to be, that kind of thing. Because all it is, what's happening is that you're just getting an image. You're getting a mirror and an image and a recording, and all of these things are kind of interacting within themselves. So there's not really that ability to be able to interact with anything on that level. So the question becomes, what is causing it, right? So Darren's asking, he's right on point, how do you explain something like Gettysburg? This is a great example because Gettysburg is such a fantastic experience of residual energy. So for example, one of the things that they're looking at right now in accordance with Gettysburg is the geology underneath the ground. So this is wild, you guys. So what they've discovered, that underneath the Gettysburg battlefield is a bed of quartz. It's a bed of quartz. And the reason why this is significant is that they are starting to understand that magnetic fields and residual energy are very much interlinked. There's no solid, repeatable evidence about this right now, but as far as I've read, but they're starting to begin to realize that these places that have these fluctuations of EMF tend to be associated with some of this residual energy stuff. So Gettysburg is under investigation right now because of this geological anomaly. And there, for those of you guys who don't know the history behind that, it was a war zone there. And people and staff have reported seeing soldiers walking the battlefield. They've been hearing cannons go off. They've seen, fronts advance. They've seen, it's unbelievable. And the people that I've spoken to who have been, say it's absolutely, it's a really phenomenal location to go to, and it's the activity is very steady. So they've had some really interesting things go on there, but they're looking at that aspect of it. So EMF is such a strong candidate right now as a possibility as to one of the factors, at least, as to why this is happening and why it happens in some locations versus others. There's a theater here in Edmonton, a live theater, and they've had a really interesting case of residual energy for a lot of years. They used to actually be an old fire hall back in the day in Edmonton, and what they started reporting was hearing firemen's footsteps on the upper level. They would hear footsteps clunking around on the upper level, and they would smell horses in the main theater area. And the reason why they were smelling the horses was because they used to have horses that were pulling the fire carts and stuff like that. So they would have the barn kind of in the basement, and then on the upper level was where the firemen hung out and ate and drank and all that stuff. So what was cool about this when we got in to investigate it was the fact that especially the lower level had an incredible amount of high levels of EMF. Really high. And again, we see it over and over and over again where those two things seem to be very much parallel. So if we look at something like, effects of magnetics and things like that on recording things, of course, like, even tape, analog tape and stuff like that, we start to wonder if there's something to do with the universe that is able to record some of these circumstances over and over again. So residual energy, as I say, it's really cool. It's very unique, and it's kind of different. So the next category that I end up looking at specifically, which is one of the most fascinating, I think, is of course the hauntings that seem to be far more intelligent, right? So things like spirit hauntings, when people encounter a loved one, and sometimes on the negative side, where people encounter something that doesn't seem to be human, that is frightening, and behaves very differently. So when Stephanie and I first founded Entity Seeker, of course, everybody's big question at the time is, well, what are these things? What is it? And the fact is right now we don't know. We don't know. We don't have, there is no such thing as a ghost meter. We don't know what to measure because we don't know what they're made of. We don't know how it happens. There's a lot of different theories when it comes to negative entities as to why these things exist, how they exist. One of them being the idea that they are negative focused thought into a space, and our thought becomes the thinker. Our thought forms consciousness. And this was proven in the Philip experiment in Ontario, as well as when they reproduced it with the character that they created named Lilith. And they were able to prove the fact that our thoughts really can create, or seem to be able to create, consciousness in and of itself. So it's very interesting. But when Stephanie and I had to address this problem, what we realized was that answering the why isn't necessarily something or the how isn't something that's really gonna help us out in the initial phases, because we might not know the answer to that for a long time. But what we did start to take a look at was behavior. Okay, we don't know what they are, but we can turn around and start to examine the behavior between what they are doing, how people are responding, how they are reacting, and start to build profiles based off of this so that we can start to deal with the issue. What they are can sit on the back burner as long as we can start to work with the behaviors and deal with those. So we started a really interesting profiling program where we were able to start mapping out these different behavior patterns and be able to start identifying them so that we could get ahead of a lot of this negative activity right at the get-go. And that began the birth of our Teaching the Living program. But we don't know exactly what a lot of these negative entities are. Every culture has got a name for them. We've got the Oni in Japan. We've got the Kelpies in Scotland. We've got demons in the sort of Christian traditions. We've got, it's everywhere. It's in every culture. Everybody's got a different name, but they do seem to crop up when you've got people who have been hanging out in that negative end of the emotional scale. And you also see them creep up in places where there has been a lot of negative focus. So for example, if we take a look at something like the Greyfriars Kirkyard, in the UK, we see an area that is basically a cemetery now, but it used to house and was sort of a holding pen for super sick people, like really sick people. We're talking plague stuff here. And when we start to look at this group of people with this, this obviously, negative focus, you've got low energy for a long time. And now they've got a situation where they've got an entity that they report who bites and scratches and all sorts of things, and they've closed off part of that Greyfriars Kirkyard to the public so that nobody gets hurt. So it's very interesting. So you see this correlation all the time. And Darren's saying, are some demonic? Well, again, demon is a word based in the Christian faith only. And when we start to look at all these different cultures, it's everywhere, so everyone has a take on what they are. I don't like the word demon. I think it labels stuff in a way that I don't agree with. I think it takes the scientific look off of it a little bit, and people start to get a bias about it, and people stop looking at it from a objective perspective. And we hear the word thrown around a lot on the TV, and I think it simplifies it too much. But we just have a phenomenon here that we have to start to look at from a behavior perspective. We have, it's something that, just in the same way that we would look at a set of behaviors from an animal or anything like that, we have to be able to take a step back and look at the set of behaviors that's in front of us. And everybody's got a label for it. Every culture has got a different, a different label, a different face for what they are. And the bottom line is we just don't know. We just don't know. And all we can do is, as I say, look at the behavior, look how we are interacting with them. Right? Look, how are we interacting with them? What is our role in this interaction? What do we have to own in order to understand what's going on here? And there's always, no matter how flat you make a pancake, as Dr. Phil says, there's always two sides. And we have to look at our own energy and our vibrational state to understand the dynamic about what's going on. These are always reflections of something that's going on within us all the time, every time. We wouldn't be sitting on their same frequency or be in range of them if we were not somehow resonating with what these things were. So we have to be mindful of it. So when we take a look then at the positive side of all of this, it brings up a great question that Dan asked yesterday, and he came up. I thought this was a great question, and he asked, my experiences with the paranormal are mostly positive. I can't say I've had a negative. I hear people talking about or anything like what is on TV. While I understand TV is for entertainment, how is it so radically different? Why don't people share their happy hauntings as much? And I think this is such a great question, because Dan, you're spot on. People don't, and the bottom line is most of the time, either A, people have a preconceived notion that all of this is bad or terrible. So if they experience something, they automatically assign a negative story to it. So that becomes a big problem. The second part of the problem is the fact that you've got an industry, a television industry that is built around the idea of shock and awe and fear. And fear is really great for ratings. People tune in because they want to be scared. All sorts of crazy stuff like that. So they like the jump scares, and people like jump scares as well. But unfortunately, what happens is that this gets focused. This becomes the focus rather than the abundance of positive encounters that have happened. And the majority of people, like a huge amount of people, I'm talking 80+% of people have reported that their experiences have changed their lives for the better. They've been amazing and positive and joyful. Edward's asking, I read somewhere that a negative entity will leave a warm heat signature as opposed to a positive entity, which would be a cooler heat signature. Is this true? Really, really good question. I have not noticed that that's been an issue. What I've noticed with negative entities is that they will often do things to get you to leave the space. So one of those things tends to be a drop in temperature. And they just make it brutally unpleasant in the room. Smells are another big one. Lots of terrible smells, things that the human brain is actually hardwired to not like. So things like feces, rotting meat, all sorts of just gross sulfur, stuff that we're sort of attuned to going, no, we can't. That's not what we want to do. And we tend to leave. And a drop in temperature tends to be on the list of tends to be on the list of those. It's almost like a little bit of a warning sign, and then they start acting like a skunk, and then all of a sudden, the whole space will just absolutely reek, or the temperature will fall, or all sorts of stuff. But that's what I've noticed with temperature changes with them anyway. With the positive end of this. As I was saying, they don't get talked about much, and which is so frustrating, especially in the area of grief and bereavement and hope, because when we start to look at those things, often these paranormal experiences are some of the best experiences of our entire life. They are about reconnecting with who we are and who our loved ones are now once they've moved over and passed over to pure positive source energy. And because so many cultures and religions and things like that have labeled this stuff as evil, sometimes what will happen is people will come to a parishioner or a clergy person or somebody that is who they see as an authority, and automatically be told that this stuff is evil, they shouldn't be experiencing it, or a medical professional that might turn around and tell them they're crazy, they're not grieving properly, I've heard all sorts of crazy things. So what's happening now is that they're starting to understand that they need to really embrace this as a very positive mental health movement forward. And I do say movement for a reason. for years, this was something where we had this, these negative connotations to psi experiences, to being connected. People who have said, they've experienced, a beautiful non-physical energy, call it, angels or God or whatever it is that you want to label it as. But they've had these amazing encounters with their loved ones and so on and so forth. And, and then they go to some sort of authority, or they go to family or something like that, and they get labeled as crazy, which is absurd. There's research that's been going on right now in South America, in some of the universities of Brazil and places like that has been a real game changer for a lot of this stuff. So, for example, they're beginning to look at things like the MRIs of the brains of mediums, things like that. So the world is changing, and they're realizing this is not a hallucination. This is something more than that. Recently, there's a brilliant researcher, Christine Simmons Moore, whose research has branched into hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. So hypnagogic is when you're going into sleep, and hypnopompic is when you're coming out of sleep. And that space in between where you're sort of awake and sort of sleepy. And they used to completely label that as a trick of the mind or a trick of the brain. And what the research is beginning to show now is that it just might not be. There might be more to it. Where the line is between that hallucination and an actual paranormal event, that's where things are becoming a little bit tricky, because now we have to figure out how to make that distinction, and they have not been able to do that yet. It's going to happen. So, when we start to break down some of these categories, we can start to see where the lines are between what the different phenomenon is, and be able to start to classify it. And so many people have asked me, okay, well, what do we do if we're not sure? If you're not sure if this is a negative experience or a positive experience, sometimes our conditioning from parents or our environment or things like that start to make us question, was this a bad thing? Was I just scared, for no reason? How do I make that distinction? And the best thing you can do to make that distinction is start to tap into how you were feeling at the time. How were you feeling at the time? Were you feeling really good? Were you feeling happy? Were you feeling, positive or content? Or were you, have you got that stuff to heal up? Have you been, maybe suppressing something that needs to be talked about or healed? Were you upset or grieving or, depressed or whatever? Start to take a bead on how you were feeling at the time. And that is usually the best indicators to figure out whether something was, negative, positive, in your best interests, all of that kind of thing, because we really do attract where we are. It's all a reflection. It's all that reflection. So that's the best way to do that. So the process that I wanted to give you guys today is to take a look at what it is that you are promoting with your attention in your life. I've been watching recently, of course, everybody is going crazy with the pandemic and pointing fingers, and it's really easy to start to label all of these different things as, of course, negative or positive, but people are pushing awareness out of, look at this thing that I hate, or look at this thing that I disagree with. And I think we have to take a really hard look at that and remember that what we are putting our attention to, we get more of. The universe doesn't hear no. So I think today, what I would encourage you guys to do is ask yourselves, what are you promoting? Are you promoting what you love and support, or are you promoting something that you're completely disagreeing with just by putting your attention there? And sometimes this actually has to do with what we are watching on TV and things like that. We have to be so mindful right now of that. There's so much going on in our experience that has been up, down, and all over the place, that we have to be mindful of what we're watching. So the reading that I wanted to give you guys today is, I love this. I found this last night, and I thought this is one of the better ones. This is coming out of Faith in the Valley by Miss Iyanla Van Zandt. And I thought this was so powerful, and I think you guys will find it that way too. So check this out. When you learn to identify yourself as a spiritualized individualization of good, the people and experiences in your life take on a completely different meaning. A spiritualized individualization cannot be abused, abandoned, or rejected. You can be tested, challenged, or prepared to make wiser choices. A spiritualized individualization of good cannot have low self-esteem, poor self-value, or low self-worth. You can have areas of perception or understanding that require refining and fine-tuning. When you understand yourself as a spiritualized representation of Source's goodness, individualized at the very point that you exist, you can no longer see yourself as poor, broke, in lack of, or needing anything. Instead, you recognize your ability to withstand the ebb and flow of events, knowing that the more you expect, the more you will get. The more you intend to receive, the more you will have. The higher you raise your vision and standards, the greater will be the flow of good to you and through you. You see as you recognize, embrace, and honor yourself as a spiritualized individualization of good. You invoke your ability to create whatever you desire to experience. And in other words, you step into your power. I love it. I love it. And Darren's saying there's not enough time for today's subject matter. I completely agree with that. So we'll come back to this. We will come back to this. And this is one of the categories that we're going to be doing in the Spiritual Healthcare Masterclass as well. We're going to do a whole bloody week on this during that time period also. So it's going to be really good because, yeah, I agree. You can't cram it into a... You just can't cram it in, you know. There is just so much to talk about. There's so much to go into. So the to-do that I wanted to give you guys today, oh my God. Okay, so this is great. So 6 p.m. Mountain Time tonight, Ian Van Zandt, who we've been reading tons of her stuff over the last little while, is doing a live stream class called the Spiritual Spa. Okay, so she does this once a month. It's fantastic. And today is such a good class that's coming up. It's going to be about breaking those family patterns, breaking the family patterns. We've been talking about legacy. We've been talking about this stuff on spiritual healthcare here, about the idea of how to start to begin to deconstruct all that. And she's going to be talking about that live tonight on Crowdcast. Okay, it's going to be on Crowdcast. It's going to be awesome. So Spiritual Spa. She'll be doing that. So grab your spot, reserve your spot. You can probably, I'm assuming you can just go to Crowdcast for that. I'm pretty sure. If you search Spiritual Spa or Jan Van Zandt, it'll come up. So I will post a link on the Entity Seeker Facebook page. I will definitely be there. I hope you guys can make it as well. Her live streams are fantastic. You will come out with a ton of information. So hopefully it'll be good, and you guys will join us there as well. It'll be really cool. So yeah, so come and join us at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I think it's going to be really, really fun. So, as well. And thanks. Sally says, I really know my stuff, and thank you for the video. Thank you guys. I couldn't be doing this without you guys. I really couldn't. You guys are what is fueling all of this. So, I mean, it's the pleasure is mine to be here and offer what I know, what I have come to know, about the paranormal and things like that. And we'll chat about it, more tomorrow. We'll get a little further into it. Tomorrow. I am going to be on, and I'm not sure if this is live or not, so I still have to find out the information. I'm going to be on the Conspiracy podcast tomorrow night. We're going to be chatting about exorcism of all things, and all the different the films and the rituals behind it and all sorts of things. So I will, once I have more information on that, I will post it, and that because it'll be really fun. It's hosted by Emily Stakely, who is just fantastic. She's just a blast. I love doing her shows. What the Frick, Paranormal, and things like that. We just have such a great time. So she's going to be hosting that, and it's going to be really cool. So once I get the information, I will be passing it on to you guys. Now, everybody, before we go into our day, got to do our health affirmations from the amazing Abraham Hicks. So everybody take a breath. It is natural for my body to be well. Even if I don't know what to do in order to get better, my body does. I have trillions of cells with individual consciousness, and they know how to achieve individual balance. When this condition began, I didn't know what I know now. I don't need to understand the cause of this illness. I only have to gently, eventually release this illness. It doesn't matter how it got started, because it's reversing its course right now. And there's no hurry about any of this. My body knows what to do. Well-being is natural to me. My inner being is intricately aware of my physical body. My cells are asking for what they need to thrive, and Source is answering those requests. I'm in very good hands. My only work is to relax and breathe, and I can do that easily. Everybody take a breath. Thank you all so much. If you want to catch up on past classes and go back and take a look at what we have done prior, entityseeker.ca, as well as youtube.com/entityseeker. All of it is there. You guys can grab all the videos and whatnot. And as I say, stay tuned, because soon we are going to be announcing the Spiritual Healthcare Masterclass that I talked about yesterday. It's going to be a deep dive into all of these subjects that we've been touching on. There's going to be workbooks and links and papers and all sorts of stuff for you guys to dig your fingers into. And I'm thrilled to be able to set this out and make this happen. So as I say, it's still in the works. We're still plowing through it, but it's coming along, and it's going to be amazing once it's there. So stay tuned, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and keep your vibrations high. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning. Spiritual Healthcare. Bye, guys.